Study Session 2. Marriage and Family Institutions 1. Introduction. In the last unit, you learned about the meaning of social institutions and the major types of social institutions in Africa. In this unit and the next, you will be learning about the marriage and family systems as a form of social institution in Africa. Marriage and family institutions are major social institutions in Africa. Marriage and family are closely related concepts. Marriage is one important step that leads to family formation. In this unit, particular attention will be placed on the concepts of marriage and family, the types of marriage and family, and the role of family and marriage in African societies. Learning outcomes. At the end of the lecture, students should be able to 1. Define and use correctly all the key words printed in bold. 2. Explain the concept of divorce in marriage. 3. List and explain at least 2 types of marriage. 4. Describe the role of bride price and dowry in marriage. The concept of marriage. Meaning of marriage. Marriage is a system by which a society recognizes the right of a man and a woman to live together and have a stable sexual relationship. Marriage is diverse throughout the world. Although marriage has some common qualities, it differs from one society to the other. Marriage brings about new rights, new roles, and new social relationships. In every marriage, there are 3 important prerequisites. Firstly, the families of intending couples are involved. Secondly, there is the payment of a bride price. And thirdly, there is a form of religious undertone to marriage ceremonies. In most societies in Africa, parental consent to a marriage partner is very essential. In contracting indigenous African marriages, the decision of the intending couple's larger families supersedes the decision of the couples themselves. The family has a say over who their son or daughter marries with regards to age, religious affiliations, ethnic groups, and so on. Every African community has rules of incest or incest taboos. That is, rules discouraging intermarriages between close relatives. For instance, it is a taboo for a father to marry or have sexual intercourse with his daughter. The same goes for mother to son, brother to sister, and sometimes cousins to cousins. However, these restrictions vary from society to society. For some societies in Africa, there is an exception to the rule. Some royal family members may be allowed to intermarry or have sexual intercourse so as to preserve the royal blood from being contaminated if no royal equal can be found. For example, part of a king's coronation is to sleep with his mother. In another society, an heir to the throne or a king who does not yet have a wife may be required to marry his sister if there are no eligible ladies that fit the royal status. Among the Ashantis in Ghana, marriages between cousins are allowed. What is marriage? Marriage is a system by which a society recognizes the right of a man and a woman to live together and have a stable sexual relationship. It also enforces a system of taboos, which ensures that certain people do not mate or marry. For example, Parents are not expected to have sexual intercourse with children. Brothers are not expected to have sexual intercourse with sisters. Payment of bride price and dowry. An essential step to be taken in contracting a marriage between a man and a woman is the payment of bride price by the man's family to the woman's family. This comes in form of paying a certain amount of money and some listed items to the bride-to-be's family. On the other hand, the money or properties a woman carries from her father's home to her husband's house is referred to as a dowry. Bride price and dowry are significant in African marriages, although the requirements vary from society to society. For instance, among the Turkana of northern Kenya in East Africa, bride price is paid in cattle. The number of cattle to be collected from an eligible suitor depends on how rich he is. It should be noted that sometimes the bride's family may write off the bride price a groom is supposed to pay. This kind of marriage may be referred to as gift marriage. Solemnization of a marriage. Most marriages are considered to have been completed after some form of religious rites. For Christian couples, the final solemnization of a marriage will be done in the church. For Muslims, it will be done in the mosque. Some other people may choose to solemnize theirs in the traditional way, in which libations will be poured to the ancestors of the couples. Endogamy and exogamy. Can you remember what we discussed earlier about incest taboos? They are a form of rules restricting certain members of society from mating or marrying. It ensures that marriages are far enough outside the family. The practice of marrying outside one's group is termed exogamy, while endogamy is defined as the practice of marrying within the group. In reality, most marriages are exogamous in some respects and endogamous in others. In West African societies, marriages are not permitted among relatives. In this respect, they are exogamous. On the other hand, Africans always tend to marry members of their own social group. For example, individuals tend to marry a person from the same ethnic group, religious sect, social class, and so on. Different kinds of marriage. Generally, the number of spouses an individual in a marriage has is used to determine the kind of marriage it is. There are rules in every country which govern how many persons a man or a woman may marry. The following are some of the forms of marriage a society may have. 1. Monogamy. Monogamy is a major form of marriage. This is the marriage of one man to one woman at a time. Individuals who separate from or divorce their spouses and remarry another in their place are referred to as serial monogamists. 2. Polygamy. Polygamy is another major kind of marriage. It is a plurality of marriage. It is a form of marriage in which a person is married to many spouses. It is very common in African societies. There are two variants of polygamy, namely polygyny and polyandry. Polygyny is the marriage in which a man marries more than one wife, while polyandry is a marriage in which a woman is married to many men. For instance, in Nigeria and South Africa, men are allowed traditionally to marry more than one wife. There is another form of polygamy called group marriage. This is a combination of polygyny and polyandry. In this case, groups of men and women enjoy more or less equal conjugal rights over one another. Every culture has its tradition of paying a certain amount of money and some listed items to the bride-to-be's family. Do you know the amount that is paid in your culture? Your response here is dependent on what is obtainable in your culture, which is likely to vary from other cultures. If you are not sure, it will be good if you found out. 3. Levirate and sororate. These two are also referred to as affinal marriages. An affin is a relative by marriage. In the levirate form of marriage, a man is required to marry the wife or wives of his deceased brother. It is closely related to another form of marriage known as widow inheritance. At times, a man may marry his father's widow or widows other than his mother or those widows who are senior to his mother. The man may be older than some of the wives or be in the same age group. Levirate is more easily constituted in polygynous societies than in monogamous ones. If a living brother is already married to one wife that is permitted to marry by law, he may outrightly refuse to marry his deceased brother's wife or wives. Levirate marriage is common among the Luo people in Kenya and in Uganda. This kind of marriage is also commonly practiced in Nigeria. However, it is gradually fading out. In sororate, a widower is required to marry the unmarried sister of his deceased wife. To put it in another way, a woman who is not already married is required to marry her deceased sister's husband. Sororate is common where a considerable bride price has been paid and the wife's family feel obliged to provide another mate for their son-in-law. These two forms of marriages are practiced after a primary marriage has been terminated by death of one of the spouses. 4. Ghost marriage. This is a form of marriage that requires a living brother to take a wife on behalf of a dead bachelor to raise offsprings in the name of the dead person. The Nuer people practice this form of marriage. Duration of marriage. Marriages are universally conceived as a permanent tie, but the society provides a means, whether easy or difficult, of terminating unsuccessful marriages. This is known as divorce. No society encourages divorce, but in practice, it is recognized that certain conditions make it better to terminate a marriage than have it continue as a failure and perhaps as a discouragement to those approaching marriage. Among the Bagandas of East Africa, a man may divorce his wife at will, sending her back to her family and demand the return of the bride price. The Baganda woman cannot divorce her husband. However, if she is badly treated, she may run away and claim aid from one of her clansmen. This kind of situation is very common in African societies, but nowadays, spouses in a marriage have equal rights to divorce. Barrenness, impotence, incompatibility, infidelity or adultery, and economic incapability are some reasons why couples may decide to terminate their marriage. Study Session Summary. In Study Session 2, you have learned that 1. Marriage is one important step that leads to family formation. Families are brought into existence through marriage, and children are a basic feature of a family. 2. There are different types of marriage and family. 3. There are rules of incest that restrict members of the family from marrying a close kin. 4. There are guidelines for marriage dissolution for unsuccessful marriages. 5. Kinship is a key aspect of the marriage and family institutions in Africa. That ends Study Session 2. Thank you for listening.